It has always been my calling to speak through my work as a storyteller, as an actor and a writer. But I have come to the disturbing recognition that my work has been getting targeted by a multi-interest black ops since before I legally became an adult. I strongly suspect it was happening while I was attending Tisch School of the Arts, and it may have been happening while I was attending the Pennsylvania Governor's School for Excellence in the Arts, where I was accepted for both visual arts and acting and chose to attend for acting. I did not say or do anything that I believe would have provoked the church to spy on me with their own in-house spy wing or hired private investigators, which I didn't even know was a capacity they had until I read about it in recent years and witnessed it firsthand myself. Although I have no way of confirming who the many hired or incentivized operatives and private investigators who have befriended me over the years technically work for. I believe that prior to my publishing satire about the church, which was when I think I was officially put on a list of antagonists to be targeted with what may or may not still be officially referred to as the fair game policy, which when I was involved in the church I was told no longer exists. That the FBI was monitoring the church because it has a very not so secret history with the FBI, who has raided the church's files and exposed them for having spied on and sabotaged and harassed numerous people, including Paulette Cooper, which is a story that's available in The Unbreakable Miss Lovely by Tony Ortega, which outlines a surveillance and spy wing that has only become more sophisticated with the technology developments that have taken place since the time when that book was written. However, Paulette Cooper was a journalist who signed up for Scientology courses with the full intention of going undercover as a journalist. Her position in relation to the church was clear from the beginning. She had the luxury of a journalism contract she was getting paid, it was no longer a luxury when she wound up getting harassed for life. And she went through hell on earth and was befriended by spies whose job it was to live in her apartment and try to get her to do things like develop severe alcoholism and get her to jump off her roof. Things like serious psychological warfare that you would think is only reserved for Putin's greatest enemies. But she was surveilled by the church. She wasn't getting monitored by the FBI as a potential threat. I mean, who knows? Maybe. You never know with the FBI. But depending on the time period. But I think when I was part of the church and had not expressed dissatisfaction or satirized them in any way, because I was attending a prestigious state-sponsored arts program for high schoolers, and because I was going to a fairly prestigious acting school known for its connections to some powerful entertainment industry people and alumni, the FBI was looking at me as a potential target because they were concerned that any kind of Scientologist who achieves success in the arts risks being an endorsement for the church directly or indirectly, even if they say, oh, you know, I'm not really involved in the church, but I did stuff growing up and it helped me or something. After I started getting targeted by this black ops, I really started doing a lot of informal research into instances of other people getting spied on or stalked or sabotaged, both by cults, religions, and government intelligence and organized criminal groups. Basically, I got really into researching instances where people are having their privacy severely violated by organizations. And it looks like a lot of organizations use investigation, surveillance, and spycraft to some degree. It's a huge industry. And if one organization is using it, all the others have to use it too, just so they can like keep their intellectual property and not be at the mercy of somebody having more advanced weapons of spycraft than they do. So it's a constant spycraft race for, you know, anyone in a position of power or resources. And there's just a ton of articles about it and even more podcasts, some of which are credible, some of which are questionable or don't cite their sources very thoroughly. But another thing I've gleaned from my research into how the FBI has gone about targeting groups that they're concerned about, either because they're extremists or because they're an unidentifiable religious fringe group that they're thinking may or may not be a cult or doing some illegal activities or organized criminal groups, is that well, if it's a religious group, they generally aren't going to pick a highly respectable, highly visible kingpin at the center of the group right away necessarily. They're gonna pick somebody on the edge who's somewhat of a weaker link, that maybe they can get to react or freak out or discredit themselves. Somebody who's maybe more economically vulnerable, maybe more socially vulnerable, or a combination of those. There was, a podcast about an FBI agent or a CIA agent who basically honey trapped this young guy whose dad owned a pizza parlor, and she was trying to expose him as a religious extremist. He was an inexperienced kid who grew up very religious, and so he didn't have a lot of experience dating or with romance at all. He was a virgin, super easy target to honey trap. Somebody who doesn't know themselves romantically, thinks in their head like, oh, it's just you get married and you're in love forever. They have no defenses against the brutal romantic tactics of the contemporary world. No psychological defenses against ghosting. They're probably you are such a target if that's you, for these honey traps. Already a target in contemporary dating just as it is, but like for a honey trap, it's just so easy to get you to look insane if you're that person, that inexperienced, like, religious virgin, living in a non-urban setting where you're not exposed to that much, like, differing cultures and intellectual diversity from your own little bubble. You're so screwed if you get targeted by a honey trap. But this particular target crossed many, many other lines that would have never been even on the table for me. But it is something I did notice. I was like, oh, dude got honey trapped. They obviously chose me because I'm not like a wealthy Scientologist whose whole family is in it, and I'm like, it's not like I'm like second generation, third generation, who's assimilated more into contemporary American culture, so I can like play it cool when I know someone's messing with me. That girl on Saturday Night Live was like a couple years below me at Stella Adler. I didn't know her or see her. I just figured it out later when I read about her in an article. And she's like second, third generation. I doubt she got the same treatment I did. I was maneuvered by a series of undercover, like, professors and students into positions where I could be like targeted with some serious psychological warfare. She didn't get that treatment because I'm pretty sure the FBI was like, we can't do it with her. Like, it's the church probably has, handlers, like guardians, just like checking in on her. She was probably way in more good standing. She probably went to course like way more often, and just, I don't think the FBI would have been able to touch her. So they chose me because I'm a weak link, right? I was a weak link. My parents weren't in it. My parents aren't wealthy. I was always economically precarious in college. It was like, oh, I've just enough money for food, maybe not quite enough money for food, maybe not quite enough money for train fare, maybe not quite enough money for all the books I need this semester, maybe not quite enough time to pull off these assignments to my actual potential. I was always a little bit overworked and a little, like, actually way overworked and way underfunded, and just like I was compared to like a very kind of privileged college student, I was very much on my own. And people did try to really took advantage of this, sometimes succeeded, but I was definitely targeted with psychological warfare and sabotage that was ultimately for the purpose of trying to basically make sure I didn't graduate with an agent, didn't hit the ground running, which I was ready to do. I was like, over the course of college, I was like, okay, I'm doing all the scenes, all the plays, all the projects that I can. I'm like, oh, Meryl Streep did whatever 40 plays while she was at such and such school. Okay, I'm gonna do at least 40 combined films projects while I'm here. I'm gonna audition for stuff as a freshman on the sly, things like that. And I didn't realize it. I had so much like just focus and endurance, just wanting to kill each project. I was just not recognizing that I was getting so blackballed and targeted by a multi-interest black ops, and like maneuvered into projects selectively, I think to spy on me or try to get me to say something that would put me on the church's shit list so that I would be fair gamed, and then I would be just like left to flounder. So that is probably a solid, thick nonfiction novel's worth of information that I can't fit into one very small video. But I'm gonna focus on an instance of Jill Kargman and Sophie Kargman targeting me with sabotage at the Williamstown Theater Festival. I'm not saying they're the only ones. There were many people over the years, either incentivized by Scientology or incentivized by the FBI or incentivized by other peripheral interests that were collaborating with either group. Government intelligence and law enforcement has historically at times collaborated with organized criminal groups, NGOs, activist groups, religious groups, depending on what they need to get done, in an implicit way, because the legal departments of these government and law enforcement agencies have to follow a very rigid protocol. And if they collaborate with alternate groups, those groups can sometimes do things and get information in a faster way, because they don't have to follow the same codes as law enforcement, and there can sometimes be a kind of synergy if it's done in a way that's, not on paper. But that is really not my place to talk about, because I've not done a scholarly depth of research in that area, but you can easily glean from listening to a few legitimate podcasts and reading a few articles here and there that has happened throughout history. So I went to the Williamstown Theater Festival one summer while I was in college. I was ready to devote myself, heart, body, soul, and mind to the theater, as I did all throughout school, much to the much to the test of my limits of exhaustion, but never with any regrets. And I was cast in director's project. Everybody at the festival, from the intern to the stagehand, to the scenic artist, to the celebrities who were starring in the main stage productions were all told by the artistic director, you have to attend every show. I don't care how tired you are. I don't care if you had a 12-hour, changeover assignment the day before. You all have to go see each other's shows unless you have rehearsal or a show during that time or another assignment. So that was the spirit of the festival. Everybody goes and sees everybody's show. So I really managed to achieve like a fusion with my performance of this first role that I did in a project that was like one of the first in the festival. It was an absurdist comedic play, and it was one night, one performance, and like you can't really achieve like your true stride unless you get to do like hundreds of I mean, but I was like, like I broke through. I really broke through this role. It was like I'd been running in this insane hamster wheel of school where it's like I'm doing all these scenes where I constantly feel I don't have enough time to really digest the role, because I also have to like go to academic classes and do like 5 scenes from 5 different plays in 1 week rather than just like delve into a single play and like actually get to truly be an actor rather than a student. So in this one, I was like, okay, finally I'm getting to, like, I rehearsed the play, and then I hit that point where I was like, it's not there. And I actually had time to get it farther, where I was like, oh, it's synthesized. The role has synthesized, and now I can really get on stage and do it. And it, like, unfortunately, we didn't get to do it for more than one night, but if we had, I would have had that synthesis that needs to happen. And because the director like worked with me and said, look, it's not there yet, it's not there. So I got to get this role to the point where it's synthesized for me, and I was like really living and playing in it. It was an absurdist play. I'm not saying it was perfect, but it had synthesized to the point where I could live in it and get it. I could have just kept going and kept, but it was at the point where I was inhabiting it. I could inhabit this role. I wasn't just doing acting school stuff. Like, I was inhabiting the role. At that point, I wasn't old enough to play the role, but the point is I got to actually do this thing artistically that I had wanted to do all along, but being in a student setting was kind of prohibiting me from getting to do, maybe because we were learning like a technique. So they were giving us a lot of foundational stuff and not necessarily wanting us to take it farther, because they wanted us to master these foundational basics first. So I got a huge, because it was one of the first projects of the season, and because everybody at the festival was told, you better go to every play, I don't care who you are, you better go watch every project, even if it's like the 5-minute Shakespeare scene done under the bridge by, like, you know, one of us apprentice, and I was like an apprentice, which is like you're not the apprentice. There's like the professionals that are actually hired by the festival. There were the non-ex, the non-equity company, who auditioned to get in and were given like free housing and like a little stipend. And then there were there was like the company that like helped developed, I forget what they were called. They were the company that were to help develop like playwrights, and they would get cast in small roles. They were usually like attending Yale or like Juilliard or something. And then there were the apprentices who actually paid to be there. And yes, you did apply. You applied on paper and you got a recommendation from like an acting teacher. And then you paid them to go do free work for them. And I was like, yeah. And that's fine. That was fine. That part was fine. I was fine with that. I wouldn't be complaining about that. That's a whole system that has to do with arts funding. You know, they had opportunities for financial relief. What I'm here to talk about is that and even though my parents lost their house at the end of college, I wouldn't be complaining about that. I understand that we all exist in this like capitalist system, and I wouldn't be here bitching about the specific festival for that at all. I'm here to talk about me getting targeted by a black ops. So, because I did my performance early in the festival, everybody was like still not sleep deprived, and everybody came to see the show, and it got a huge response from the audience during the show. And then I got all these people like coming up to me and complimenting me like for weeks and weeks after. And I was like, thank you so much. Like, thank you. Like, because like, I don't like compliments. I always hated flattery. And like, often when someone's complimenting me, it'd be like, wow, you should learn to accept compliments more. And like, no, I shouldn't. I should learn. Now, I don't say this, but it's like anyone who's ever really tried to be like, oh, you should accept compliments. It's like, no, I should be accepting jobs and paychecks. If you like, why do you care about giving me so many compliments? But anyway, after this show, why do people care about me accepting compliments? Like, I want jobs. Like, stop trying to hustle me. But so like for this show, I felt like, thank you. Like when people compliment me, I felt like I could just be like, thank you. I felt like I'd done something that actually was like I'd synthesized into a role, and that I was doing something like I felt I could accept compliments about it, and that I'd done something good, that I'd done good work. And that's fine. I think that's a good barometer. Like, you know, if I feel someone's complimenting me about something where I'm not ready to take the compliment, I'll say thank you, but it's like, I don't have to believe you. I don't have to take that as my reward. Like, I'm just going to be polite and accept it, but I do not have to delude myself that this is where I want it to be. That's a bad thing. You don't want to like be if you know something can be where you want it to be and it's not there yet, don't let people tell you, oh, you should believe me. No, don't let people brainwash you that you don't need to get better when you know that you can. And yeah, so whatever. It's just a little thing, but it's just something I felt I would comment on, because me getting targeted by a multi-interest black ops has made me recognize, you know, psychological warfare is very powerful, and you want to be able to not let others influence you, but you also don't want to react in a way where they can make you look like an asshole. And so after this, I got a lot of compliments from people, but at the same time, yeah, I got compliments, and I got noticed by a lot of people. There were people all through the festival, but it was a good thing for me. And so that Sophie Kargman was an apprentice as well. She came up to me after the project. She had been cast in a project by a director, also from Tisch, in a directing project, and she came up to me. She was like, she talked to me. We met basically at, I guess, the pub nearby the festival, maybe that night or maybe another night. She was like, I love to surround myself with successful people, and, we should do an independent project together. And I didn't feel right about it, but I said yes, because you were told, say yes to everything. As an actor, say yes to everything, you never know. That's what everyone says in acting, say yes to everything. Which that's like almost a holy incantation in acting, say yes to everything. Obviously not like porn, and not, creepy stuff, not showing up at like a creepy apartment to do an audition or in a weird alley, but like to a project that is going through the proper things. They say yes to everything at first. That's a hard thing, because what does that even mean? Like, what? I don't know. A lot of people have different ideas of what yes is, and they have different ideas of what everything is. And if you're more sophisticated and more socially and economically protected, your idea of what everything and what yes is probably much more in service of your interests than, maybe what my idea was. Because you can say, oh my gosh, yes, I love to, but I have rehearsal that day. And then you plan a rehearsal for your solo project that you just made up, that now exists, so that you don't have to do that thing. Or, this is a bad habit to really get into, but like, I don't know. And when, like, it's just, it's very, very complicated. It's very complicated. Because if you say yes to everything, you won't, it doesn't work. Mathematically, that does not work. So some of us need more help than others to clarify what that means in a way that is beneficial for yourself. So I was like, yes, Sophie, let's do an independent project together. She was very much like, go-getter. I was that way. I was always doing everything, but she knew how to like control a communication and get you to do stuff. And not only did I not want to ever be able to do that, I didn't know how to do that. So we were like, let's do this independent project. And so she got like this, like, we did the application, she got the space, then she was like, what should we do? And I was like, let's do a scene from Phaedra's Love. And because I'd always wanted to do that scene. It's about this like lovesick Greek woman and her daughter, about, you know, she's like in love with this like completely terrible avoidant attachment style. I didn't know what attachment styles were then, but this terrible man, and I always wanted to do scenes about like women driven to the utmost extremes of grief by love. Always number one priority. So I was like, yeah, let's do Phaedra's Love. Let's do a scene from Phaedra's Love. Like, I'm the tall, old-looking one. I'll play Phaedra. You should play Strophe. And then she was like, oh, maybe let's read it. And then she's like, I'm not sure. I want it to be like so perfect. It's our independent project. Like, this is all I'm working on. Like, you know, this is like she's like, you got all that attention from that project, and so you're getting like people asking you to like be in things, and like, this is all I'm working on. And I was like, well, you know, like, it's an independent project. They said, you know, we can do anything, literally anything we want for the independent projects. I was like, we should be more concerned about the fact that like time is ticking away. It's like, it's not so much what we choose, it's making sure we have the time to really give it the quality work that it needs. Like, we could literally read the phone book for our independent project but if we don't give it the time, like if we gave it like 3 to 5 weeks of rehearsal, we could make that brilliant. But if you pick the best play ever and it's like you've got a week to work on it, like, you're screwing yourself. Like, we hardly have any time as it is. This whole program is only 5 weeks long. Like, we've got to start today. She was like, I really just, and it wasn't even true that like I was in more projects than her. Like, she got cast in an independent project by some prestigious dude working with Alex Timbers, because like her family's friends with Alex Timbers, and like she was like, yeah, like my aunt is on the board. I didn't know this at the time. Her aunt is like Jill Kargman, and she's like, yeah, my aunt is on the board. So last minute she was like, hey, do you want to do the apprentice program at Williamstown for the summer? And I was like, okay, I guess. Like, she studied at Harvard, and Sophie studied at Harvard, and she was taking classes with, because her parents were like, no, you can't go to acting school. That's not serious enough. You're going to Harvard like we did, and then you'll do acting as your extracurricular. Like, we're not paying tuition for you to do that. You're going to go to Harvard and get an education. And even so, she was going to Harvard. She was still studying with Scott Ziegler at the ART program. And Scott Ziegler was one of the people who wrote Practical Aesthetics, which is the handbook for the studio where I was studying at Tisch. And that studio was started by David Mamet and William H. Macy. And when I was studying there, they had the NYU department, and they had the conservatory department, which was not under NYU's jurisdictions, but we all did shows together, and we all did the Vermont summer program together. In order to get into the conservatory program at the time, you did not have to formally audition. You went through this series of intricate, complicated tasks that were meant to prove that you had what it took to be an actor. Because the studio's ethos was very much, it's not about talent, it's about hard work. It's about having the intellect and the perseverance to do the work required to be an actor. that is what it really takes to be an actor. So it was a long list of tasks and things you had to find out, and like a scavenger hunt, and one of them was like, do a magic trick. It's no longer like that from what I've heard. And it was only like that for the conservatory division of the studio, because the part that was sponsored by NYU was like, this is NYU, this is like one of the top 5 undergrad acting programs. You have to audition to get into the school. Like, we're not going to get the kind of wealthy donors that, you know, we want if you're going to have these kids not audition. Like, and also the other studios all do auditions. Like, you have to audition to get into NYU. Like, sorry, you can do your whatever you want for that conservatory thing. So that little entry ritual for the conservatory program would have made it a little bit easier on, say, a private investigator who may or may not have tried to infiltrate the program to do various things for various reasons. But that's just a side note. Anyway, I don't want to sound too crazy, not at first. So Sophie Kargman was like, yeah, you know, David Mamet would come to my family functions growing up, and like, oh, like, I'm at Harvard, and, you know, I'm at Harvard with Mark Zuckerberg, who started Facebook. Like, I see him at parties, and, you know, like, oh, I did do the Atlantic Summer Conservatory, and, you know, I auditioned all summer long, and I almost got cast in this feature, and I would just go down on the weekends from Boston and audition. And yeah, so she was, she was very serious about studying acting, but her parents had said, and I almost wish my parents had that kind of boundaries, because when you see Natalie Portman decide she's going to go to college while doing films, you're like, you know, I mean, NYU has the same academic requirements of you as its general education students when you're in acting, but it's like putting that on top of your conservatory training when you're there 3 days a week, 9 to 5. I was like, I feel like I'm not doing anything with depth that I want to be doing. I feel like I'm completing assignments and then running out of time to take it where I know I could take it if I wasn't doing like all of this. But that's, I guess, the nature of any bureaucracy, and, you know, it's what keeps society running. So there it is. If you want to get out of that hamster wheel, you've got to make some serious moves, and it's really hard to do that when you're getting targeted by a multi-interest black ops. So I'm at Williamstown. Sophie's like, let's think about what scene we want to do more. Like, I'm going to order all these plays with my dad's credit card. My parents said that they're not putting any limits on how many plays I can order, because that's like an investment in my career. And I'm like, well, choosing to do a scene as early as possible is also a time investment in our career, except I didn't say that because I wasn't smart enough to argue with this bullshit. So I was like, okay, Sophie. I was more like, oh, well, she's paying, so I'm poor, and I have to do what she says now, so, okay. I was like, oh, okay. And, like, she wasn't even doing less projects than me. She was just not getting as many compliments as me. We were both having to do these crew assignments. It was just very sketchy. She would, like, be distracting me when I had to go, like, help Juliet's mom do the quick change, and I would miss it, like, every time, like a fucking asshole. I didn't really know how to say no to her because she was, like, rich and kind of pushy. And I didn't know how to have good boundaries with anyone really, but also with her. Especially not good at putting up boundaries with like rich, pushy people, which I was surrounded by in these environments. So I looking back, I'm like, was Sophie also tasked with intentionally making me miss my crew, like my quick change, so I'd look like an asshole, right? And not just as like the jealous competitive niece of a board member who probably tells her all kinds of secrets and tips, but as like a black ops person, like planning to target me, you know, because they were like, we can't let this Scientology girl do anything. Like I don't know if they were funded by some weird secret group of like people trying to make like stop Scientology from proliferating. And because like years later when I bumped into Sophie, not coincidentally at all, she like stalked me. I didn't know it at the time. Like I found out like they were involved in ABT. They were like friends with Elizabeth Moss or acquaintances or whatever. And it's just like, you know, I didn't even know Elizabeth Moss was a Scientologist back then. I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was just like, oh, I'm just existing and everything's going to be fine. I didn't know about like evil board members. I didn't know about the delicate dance of courtesan-like behavior that happens in the arts, and it all is around who has money and who has power and people just like trying to destroy each other and craziness. Like I just thought that fueled by the power of my you know, my pursuit of truth and love, you know, everything would just work out. That was because I was conditioned not to read the news and learn the Machiavellian human nature that is all around us at all times, because of the weird fringe religious group that I was involved in. So it has its pros and cons, but being targeted by this multi-interest black ops is definitely among the cons. And so Sophie was basically employing the CIA Art of Subtle Sabotage manual on my ass. And she was like, well, I want to read all these plays. I want to choose the perfect one. I want our project to be perfect. Like, well, it will be perfect if we start rehearsing now, no matter what we do. But if we choose the most brilliant play in the entire English language and we don't have enough time to rehearse, I guarantee you it's going to be regrets. Right? So she's like, but I have no boundaries with her. And I'm like, okay. And then at one point, she's like at one point she forgot her laptop in her dorm room. And I was like, I can get it for you if you want, because she was stuck down at our crew assignment for whatever reason. And she was like, okay, sure. And I was really just doing it as an errand, right? I grabbed the laptop, I went right back. Then later, she was like, oh, this really expensive dress was missing from my dorm. And I was like, what? I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. And she was like, yeah, I think I know who took it. I was like, I didn't even think she may or may not have been accusing me, but I don't know. I wouldn't have thought to ever do anything like anything of that nature. Like I just got her laptop for her one time. And, you know, living in dorms, living in colleges, people do that kind of stuff all the time. They go in each other's bags with permission to go grab such and such and such and such. And I would have never stolen anything. Like, I just wouldn't have done that. And I didn't. And so it was weird. It was weird that, I mean, maybe someone else stole her dress, and that sucks, you know. It's like, that would make anybody paranoid. I don't know. Anyway, I didn't really think about it too much. It's just something I remember. If her dress got stolen and she was having doubts about who it was. That's not really her fault. That would make anybody paranoid and lose trust. But it does mean that I'm not going into anyone's, room ever again to get anything for them, because then someone can try to frame me for stealing. So anyway, whatever. That's just a little side note. It's not really her fault if someone's, stole her dress and she wasn't sure who it was. Like, I would probably have the same reaction. I would be paranoid and not know who to trust. But that's beside the point. Anyway, I'm like, we are sleep deprived. We're being forced to do these crew assignments. We are having to audition for all kinds of stuff. Like, why are we just ordering fucking plays from the drama bookshop and reading them as the time is ticking away? I was like, I could write a play. I was like, how about I write a play? I was like, I'll write a one act, right? My ego got the best of me. And I was like, well, you're trying to read these plays. Like, it's an independent project. They literally said to us, take risks, do stuff that you think is bad. So I was like, let me try to write a play. I was like, I'll write a one act. So I literally wrote a one act. I stayed up like all night, multiple nights. I missed this big, like, monumental party that happens every year at the Williamstown Theater Festival called the Zoo Party or something. And, like, everybody goes and it's, like, amazing. And I fucking skipped it because I was, like, writing the play. I didn't get to, like, network or be cool or have stuff happen that was, like, memorable and fun. Like, and she gave me, like, a rock star energy drink as, like, a gift. Like, so I could just stay up all night and, like, die with, like, all these crew assignments, like, writing the play, right? So I finished writing, like, this whatever 10-page, like, experimental play. I was like, I wrote it. I was like, here. She's like, I mean, it's just not right for our project, And I was like, Sophie, the time is just ticking away. Like, they said we can do anything, even if the play is shit. I won't take it personally that you think my play is shitty. We should just do something, anything, and just do it. We don't have time. We don't have energy. You're killing me. Like, and then I got cast in the second round of directors projects and she didn't. So then it was like, oh, well, now I felt even more guilty because it's like, well, but, like, she got cast in, like, something where she got to dance around with these people in front of, like, the big main stage where all the big, like, patrons come and pay for tickets. So, like, I don't know. And she may have even gotten, like, some extra gigs on the actual main stage. Like, I didn't get cast in any of that. So, really, she was just manipulating my perceptions and very adept in psychological warfare. So then I got cast in another director's project, and now it's like I'm fucked because I have to devote all my time to this project and deal with this waffling around with our independent project. Like, when I'm fucking exhausting myself staying up writing the play, I can, like, not even stay awake. I'm getting deprived of sleep, like, to such an extent where it's like, I didn't even realize, like, this is, she's, like, she was using, like, mind control on me, right? Like, some weird ass mean girl mind control on me. And the time's ticking away, right? And then projects are adding up, like, okay, now there's, like, a global warming cabaret that I'm doing, for another independent project. And then, like, someone's asking if I'll be in a reading. Now we're all doing tons of projects here and there, independent projects, right? And, and it's becoming, it's just like, it's like I'm doing, a cabaret at midnight where literally I can't keep my eyes open on stage. Like, it is that crazy and so, so this one guy who in retrospect, I think Sophie and him were working together to like weirdly black ops me. And they pretended to have like a weird resentment and rivalry towards each other in order to conceal that very fact. I would say seems to be the case, having examined factors in retrospect. And he actually asked me to do a reading as I was saying to Sophie, oh, look, okay, how about I wrote this other scene, let's look at that, let's just do it. Literally anything. Like, I was like, look, I wrote a scene between a guy and a girl. You could do it with some guy and I could just be the playwright. How about that? That way I don't have to memorize any more lines when I'm working on this other thing, right? So this guy that she was having like a pretend rivalry with, to kind of hide that they were, I think, running counterintelligence on me together, he asked me to be in a reading of his play. It was a play about post 9/11, as I recall, and I read it. It was very, very dense, very political, very series of monologues. At the time, I had like no political awareness, and I was like, oh, this doesn't, I understand. I was like, this doesn't really have a dramatic arc. I kind of want to do stuff that like has like some narrative, or at least an attempt at a narrative or something personal. This just sounds like people kind of spouting news. And that's because maybe I was an idiot, maybe his play sucked, maybe both, right? But really also, I didn't have time to add any more projects. So maybe I should have just said I don't have time. And I didn't actually say those things to him, but I may have said it to another person, and because I was being spied on, they may have pooled everything about me into one central like counterintelligence operation so they could more easily fuck with me. So like after I declined his play, which was the right thing to do, I didn't have proper time. I wouldn't even be able to make rehearsals. I would have looked bad. His play would have looked bad. You need to cast an actor who's got time to give it. That was really the real reason, because I was very much say yes to everything, but at that point I was like, you will die from exhaustion if you add one more project to myself. So I was like, I can't. I was like, I really can't. I really, really don't have the time. I won't be able to do anything. Like, I will be not able to be awake. I won't be able to come to rehearsals. I already have like crew assignments during all of the rehearsals. I can't just show up and read. Like, it would be bad. It would not be good. And then I think I maybe said to Sophie, like, oh, the play was kind of just like spewing political jargon. There was, I didn't really see a through line there. And, it wasn't, that's probably because it was a political landscape I wasn't familiar with as well. So I wouldn't have been able to pick out the through line from the jargon, So anyway, maybe Sophie and the guy pulled this information, and Sophie was like, oh, I don't really want to do this scene you wrote. Like, this is the second scene I wrote and proposed to her, where I was like, hey, I wrote this little love scene between a girl and a guy. It's like a romantic navel gazing kind of like scene, like no big deal. Like, maybe you and some guy could do it and I could just sit this one out and be the playwright, right? Like, at that point I had even my like, even my ego was like, I don't even need to perform. Like, I will go insane from sleep deprivation. Why don't you just do this thing I wrote? And she was like, I mean, it's kind of vapid. And I'm like, they said we can do anything for this project. Like, maybe this project is about discovering that Joyce wrote a vapid play. Why can't it be that? Like, you could still act it somehow, right? Maybe you could learn how to bring life to a crappy vapid scene. Like, and she's like, I don't know, it's not right. And in retrospect, I'm like, were they engaging in a bit of behavioral hacking to make it feel like the universe was punishing me for declining to do this guy's 9/11 play by Sophie declining to do my little scene that I wrote? There is a lot of stuff like that I've noticed happening in examining my multi-interest Black Ops over the years. It's either Scientology spies, like, trying to manipulate me thinking I pulled bad things in and need to go back to, like, the church to fix it, or it's like some kind of exterior interest group trying to use behavioral hacking in relation to my presumed belief system to get me to do things for various purposes. It could be as simple as, like, a simple example of that would be, let's say a specific person is a specific religion, and I would never do this, and I would never even think of something so awful until I experienced getting, like, targeted by extreme psychological warfare and behavioral hacking, right? So let's say somebody is a specific religion, and that today is a holiday that requires them to give $500,000 to someone who can convince them that they're the conduit of a specific god. That's not even a real thing, but basically people can, like, behavioral hacking is when someone understands your specific belief system, just like how you could understand a specific operating system or a specific, in a computer, or understand the equations required to get an Excel spreadsheet to perform the functions you want. Behavioral hacking is when you understand a certain person's beliefs, and instead of overtly asking for consent and cooperation and engaging them consciously in cooperation, you simply take what you know about their belief system and you manipulate them using that. So an example of that would be in that Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal film, where Nicolas Cage is asked to go on a mission in order to, like, uncover Pedro Pascal's, like, illicit activity that's happening at his, like, estate. And this, like, FBI agent who's talking to him on the phone is, like, trying to guide him through, like, breaking into Pedro Pascal's, like, secret safe or whatever. And Nicolas Cage's character, like, I forget what happens. Like, he's hit in the head or he's drugged and he passes out and he's on the floor, like, incapacitated. And she's like, "Where'd you go? Where'd you go?" And then in a stroke of genius behavioral hacking, she says, "Action!" And Nicolas Cage wakes up because it's really funny, but because his character, who's Nicolas Cage, but his character is a famous actor. So even in the depths of, like, being incapacitated, he responds to the word action because he's been conditioned his whole adult life to basically awaken as a human being. When someone says the word action, you're on camera. Like, it's his sole motivating incentive. And so in a stroke of genius, this FBI agent uses behavioral hacking in a very simplistic comedic way to get Nicolas Cage to do what she wants. But someone can really, really expertly get your whole history, your entire personality profile, and behaviorally hack you in ways that you can't even conceive of. But fortunately, no one who's not like a high security clearance spy can do this yet. I don't know. Now with Elon Musk, I'm worried. But, like, yeah. So people were using their presumptions about my Scientology beliefs, and possibly even actual more in-depth information about my history, depending on what organization they worked for and what they had access to behaviorally hack me. And so likely Sophie Kargman and the people behind using her to sabotage me in this way knew that I had trouble asserting boundaries with women. I had trouble navigating the relational aggression that's classically associated with traditional feminine behavior. I had trouble asserting boundaries with women who I perceived as wealthy, as as pushy, as dominant in any way. They knew who to put on this sabotage project. Like, I was pretty good at interacting with women who would lead cerebrally and didn't seem to take much offense at nuanced perceptions of relational aggression. But like I wasn't the type of girl who would feel threatened or offended if I was wearing a lot of makeup and a dress and then somebody shows up in the same dress and makeup. Like, it wouldn't have even registered for me. Things like that. I wouldn't like, but yeah, like, so, with Sophie, it was like, I did kind of feel like a lot of the time I was walking on different eggshells that I didn't, eggshells I couldn't see. Like, I always felt like, yeah, and I think it was known when she was assigned as my saboteur at the festival that these were my vulnerabilities, among others. And that discomfort was used to my disadvantage. So yeah, I was like, Sophie, I haven't gotten a decent night's sleep in 2 weeks. I am barely hanging on by a thread to having any semblance of enough time to sleep, eat, rehearse. I'm being spread way too thin. We have to do something. And she was like, you know what? Maybe we should do Phaedra's Love. So, after like 3-4 weeks when we could have been working on it, I could have been memorizing. She drives me through all that bullshit, which no doubt has already sabotaged my work in the other director's project I got cast in. I didn't synthesize that project the way I did the first one. She's like, let's do that scene you wanted to do. After all. Like, I wrote 2 short plays. I read, and I fucked myself over because I didn't get that second director's project to the point where it could have been. And then she's like, yeah, you know what? Let's do Phaedra's Love. And I would have never thought this could be a thing a human could do, because I would have never done that. But I'm thinking this now, like, not only was this like diabolical mean girl shit where she was like prepping subconsciously at least to do that, but like I'm pretty sure she was actually assigned to do that. Like she was sabotaging me as part of some weird assignment shadow group thing that was doing this because they were like, oh, we can't let that Scientologist girl, you know, endorse Scientology and proliferate this cult. Like, we have to make sure she doesn't become like another Elizabeth Moss or something, because she's just going to spread this terrible group, which you don't know, right? You don't know that. But they're like, we can't risk it. We can't. So they wanted me there at the same time as Alex Timbers was there, because they wanted to see how I reacted to knowing that he had created a show that satirized Scientology. I reacted in a fairly like diplomatic way. It was clear my priority was acting, was my career, and it wasn't like ideological zealotry. And also, like, when you're that young, you're pretty ignorant no matter what background you come from. You're in a bubble no matter what background you come from. There may be differences of some kids are more sophisticated, some kids are more open-minded, but, you know, there are many, many factors, and I was getting targeted by a multi-interest black ops, and that's it. So, I mean, there could have been church operatives there. Who knows? I'm thinking Sophie Kargman and Jill Kargman, they couldn't have been trying to sabotage me on the church's behalf. Could they? Like, they're way too sophisticated for that, right? Like, they don't need... What would they... Like, it couldn't have been... Like, unless Sophie Kargman got a summer job working for, like, a private investigator firm that, like, her parents' friends owned, I highly doubt that. If anything, they were working for some, like, progressive NGO that was connected to, like, the CIA or the FBI to, like, stop Scientology from, like, you know, becoming an organized crime syndicate that controls the arts or something. Like, you know, leave that to the actual organized crime professionals and the governments who are trying to do it anyway, right? So anyway, so yeah, after just being, and I was so innocent. I was like, okay, Sophie, this was just a learning process for us all. like I had no concept that people could do this to you for a real agenda. It felt like having like an evil little sister who you don't yet know is evil. And Sophie was like less than a year younger than me anyway. So like, it shouldn't feel like an evil little sister when it's like they're not even a year younger than you. So I was like, okay, Sophie, it's an independent project. You may have partially, like, I just accepted her somewhat ruining my life for literally no reason. as just like a learning process, when really like, fuck this. That's fucking batshit crazy. Like, there's no way that could have been, like, it's not it, and it's not just like, oh, she's like a mean girl sabotaging me. It's like, no, this was from like the CIA manual for subtle sabotage, and it was doing it because I was involved in the Church of Scientology and I had not defected or criticized them, and Sophie was literally tasked with, you know, taking me down, ensuring I wouldn't like gain career leverage and risk endorsing the church. So on my very last legs of just having any semblance of energy, I tried to just like do this scene, which was impossible. That's why I wanted to do it like when we had 3-4 weeks, because it's not an easy play. It's not. It's hard. It was hard. I wanted to synthesize roles. I wanted to synthesize every role I was doing. I didn't want to be rushing and slapping things together. And now Sophie had ruined that. But I was like, she was behaviorally hacking me, and she was relying on the fact that as a Scientology person, I was like accepting responsibility for everything, and just accepting the journey rather than realizing this person has fucked me, and on purpose, and fuck that person. And like, Sophie was taking advantage of me not trusting my instincts around some real ass fuckery that took place, and not trusting that instinct that was like, this person makes me uncomfortable and I don't know why, because I also had this mantra of like, oh, discomfort helps you grow, right? Which is like, also, people have very different definitions of discomfort and grow that need to be addressed, because some people's definitions are much more self disadvantaging than others. So yeah, Sophie behavioral hacked me. She fucked me over. I'm pretty sure it was like part of a multiple person group in a multi-interest black ops, very much consulting the CIA manual of subtle sabotage. And they were doing it because I was vulnerable. I wasn't Elizabeth Moss. I wasn't What's-Her-Face on Saturday Night Live. I wasn't Will Smith. I wasn't like Laura Prepon. I was somebody that they could access, that they could fuck with, that didn't have protection. And they wanted to fuck with me. They wanted to make me look mediocre, make me look crazy, whatever. She's not the only person who was doing this at the festival. But, I've got to keep this at least less than an hour and a half now. So, right. So I'm like, oh boy, let's do it, Sophie. Yay. Like, I'm so deluded as to like the potential harm others can cause me. I'm not really realizing that I'm just like in this project with this person who's like fucking with me. So we rehearsed Phaedra's Love. For me, it is forced. I'm exhausted. I'm stiff. I'm not inhabiting the role. It's just so disappointing to play this thing I really wanted to play, and then to get fucked out of the time that we could have had to work on it. And like, it's a great role for both characters. Like, it's not like I'm screwing her over by having me play Phaedra, because it's in a way more advantageous. She's getting to play the younger role and like make herself more marketable, even though I'm only a year older. I'm like the, like when you're, she's like a nice, petite, short. I'm tall. Like, people are going to be like, oh, she's tall. Tall equals old. Tall equals too short for, standing next to the leading man. like tall equals like can't be near the leading man, you know, like that type of thing. Like I wasn't being selfish by saying let's do Phaedra's love and I'll play Phaedra, because the role she was playing is like as huge as, if not bigger, in the play, and like maybe doesn't have, like still has emotional breakdowns, and it's like a role that requires just as much mastery and subtlety. It's not like I was being a selfish asshole by wanting to do Phaedra's love and have myself play Phaedra. It was just like, I'm a year older, I'm tall, you're short, you're younger. And if anything, a more intelligent actress, like more subtle, would probably gravitate towards playing Strophe, and like the more kind of like basic idiot ones to play Phaedra, because at first glance you're like, oh, she's like the tragic heroine, and of course I'm also tragic with men, so like let me play the role. So that's it. Like it's not that one role was better than the other. I wasn't being a selfish asshole. It was like an equal distribution of like role quality, right? So I bet you her ass was like prepping to do Phaedra's love the whole ass time, and then only in the end she's like, you know what, let's do it. So that by that time I'd been screwed out of the time I would have needed to prepare. She gets this non-equity actor to be the director. She monopolizes the rehearsal time by just being like, no, you don't have to come yet, I'm still rehearsing, because we're just rehearsing like the week of, and it's just horrifying, and I'm exhausted, and it just feels like I'm being like swirled in the water of like a bathtub down the drain. Like it's just, I can't stop it. I can't stop the fuckery. And so it's a disaster. I mean, it's fine, but it's just like stiff, and I feel like I suck, and it's terrible, and not like I just didn't get the chance to give it the time it needed. Sophie goes to her friend Alex Timbers. She's like, hey, during like your whole cast's 30-minute break, when they've been teching for 12 hours a day for 3 days, do you think you could force them to come watch me and Joyce's scene? She didn't quite say it like that, but like Alex Timbers apparently like her family friend. And he was like, of course, Sophie. And all his actors come and watch the scene. They get to watch me suck, which I'm sure they love, because I got all those compliments at the beginning of the festival, and they were like a higher level, but I got the compliments to start everything off. And like, so I'm sure they were so happy to watch me be shit in that scene. And then, no, that's not true, because some of them were actually good people who had a spirit of ensemble, and probably found Sophie very annoying and opportunistic if she treated them the way she treated me. So then everyone goes, and they're like, okay, let's go back to rehearsal because our break is over. The guy who pretended to have this weird resentment with Sophie, who was actually working with her, he was like, yeah, everyone could see that Sophie kind of used that project to showcase herself, and you looked bad. I was like, fuck. Yes, it's true. What a shitbag life that scene was for me. I was so fucked. But I didn't realize how diabolical the gears in place to cause that to happen were until years later. I'm like, oh fuck, I am actually the target of a multi-interest black ops that's been going on for years and years. Sophie Kargman and Jill Kargman definitely pulled this shit off on purpose. I know, it's so real. And now I guess if you disagree, fucking sue me.